Hello, people. How is it going? Welcome back to Watchcast, the best place to come for your movie and TV talk. Thank you if you're joining us from YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. It is much appreciated, and thank you for listening. This week, I am just on my own, but we have plenty to talk about. Disney have dropped a ton of news this week, and also there's a lot of news regarding specifically the MCU. And then to finish off today's episode, I'm going to be breaking down how I think Marvel should have structured the multiversal saga in a way that would have given them much more success post-Endgame. Now, we're going to kick off this week's episode with our first segment, which is this week's watches. If you're new to the show, what I do on this segment is I go through everything I've watched in the past week, give my opinion on it, whether you guys should watch it, and what I think about them in general. Now, this isn't just new watches, it's also just re-watches. But yeah, so on Saturday, I watched Society of the Snow finally. I gave this one a 9 out of 10. It was fantastic. The emotion that you're able to feel through the characters and the power that's created in the way it's directed is phenomenal. The retelling of the true story of Air Force Flight 571 is amazing, and you really feel their triumph at the end. But I won't say too much on it because I really want you guys to go ahead and watch this one and feel this emotion for yourselves. Another new one I watched is Popstar Never Stop, Never Stopping. A bit of a mouthful, but this is an Andy Samberg comedy from 2016. An absolute blast. A movie that couldn't be made today because it makes a lot of jokes that now would be deemed as inappropriate and ill-timed in the times that we're in. But I think if you appreciate it for the time when it released, you can definitely have a lot of fun with it. I also rewatched Wonka this week, an absolute blast. Timothée Chalamet's Wonka is fantastic. I rewatched Alita Battle Angel, one of the James Cameron Robert Rodriguez movies. Hopefully we're getting a sequel for that soon. Gave that one again a 9 out of 10. I think it's great, a lot of high-octane action, a great story in there, but there's also a deep emotional story hidden within it as well. I stupidly rewatched Morbius and regretted my decision that I turned it off halfway through, and the last one I watched was Fantasy Island, which I gave a 2 out of 10 and didn't really have a lot of fun with. But that is all for this week's watches. Head over to our Instagram and send me your DMs of what you watched this week and also what you rated them. So, now moving into our next topic, which is the Disney news. Now, they decided on Wednesday, on their Investor Day, to drop everything. We found out that Moana 2 will be releasing on November 27th this year. Now, this is odd, because next year we are getting the Moana live-action movie with The Rock. We still don't know who is playing Moana. It seems strange to release Moana 2 this year and have the live-action next year. I would have thought they would have released Moana live-action first, rebuild the hype, and then do the sequel. That's me personally. I guess they didn't feel that was the right move. I mean, Disney don't seem to be making a lot of the right moves right now, but still, it didn't feel like the right move. But they've done it, so we have to go with how they've done it. And unfortunately, I don't see this one being very good. I didn't watch Moana and think, yeah, this one needs a sequel. And also, what made Moana so great was the songs written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and we now know that he is not returning to co-write the songs. When the strongest part of the movie is losing its key creator, is it really going to hold up? I don't think so. So, unfortunately, on that ground, I am extremely worried about Moana 2, but I will still check it out, and I'll come on here, and I'll give my review and give my thoughts, and we'll see what happens from there. Next up, they went through kind of like their next 3-year release schedule, and tried to clarify some things. So we know that next year we'll now be getting Zootopia 2. Now this one I'm a lot more happy about than Moana, also because the time between the first movie and this one has been so long, and Disney seems to benefit from having a really long time to develop a sequel. So I'm actually not as worried about this one, and this one feels like there's so many places they could take it because of how big Zootopia is, and they only touched on some of the little locations in the first movie, so there's definitely ample ground for them to grow this franchise in a sequel. To flip that on its head, they also confirmed Toy Story 5 and Frozen 3 for 2026. Now, Frozen, granted, huge success, massive movie, me personally didn't think it needed a sequel. However, we got one. So we take that as it is. We watched it. It was okay. It wasn't amazing. The songs were definitely worse. Um, the storyline was definitely not as great. And yeah, I didn't really see a third one getting greenlit. But Frozen, unfortunately, is a franchise, is an IP that Disney can milk in their Disney parks. They can milk it in their toys. They can do very easy marketing for these Frozen movies because of how easy it is to tailor a movie to kids when you have a talking snowman. It's just quite basic and safe for them doing Frozen 3, in my opinion. And I think when there's movies in their books that could definitely warrant a sequel or a third movie, and they're just not doing it, it becomes frustrating that this is what we're getting. Now, on that topic, ones that deserve a sequel, I can't believe that we are this year. Big Hero 6 is turning 10, and there's still no word on a sequel. It was fantastic. It was brilliant, filled with family heart. It was a great, great, great movie. And there's so many comics, and there's such a wealth of material that they can adapt into a film and into a fantastic animation. Because if you take how good the animation was in 2014, you bring it forward into 2024 and let Disney fully pump money into it, you could have some fantastic visuals in there. And I'd like to see them maybe bring in some of the crew that worked on the Spider-Verse movies into a Big Hero 6 movie. That would be amazing, but I don't think that's going to happen. That's just going to be a dream in my head. Now, Toy Story 5. Where to begin? Toy Story 3 was a fantastic movie that closed out that original trilogy of Toy Story movies really, really well. Every character got a payoff to what had been set up for what was, I think, around 20 years worth of Toy Story being around. And then that was it. It was done. Concluded. A really nice, concise trilogy. Explored all its characters really well. Had a great story. And then Disney went, boom, we need money. Toy Story 4, let's go. Let's work on it. And then they released it. And the general consensus was, this isn't good. So we all thought, this has to be the end. You got Buzz and Woody have now separated. They're apart. And now Disney have gone, yeah, let's do a fifth one. We need money. We need safe bets right now. So what they're doing is they're picking and choosing their franchises that are safe bets and pumping another sequel in. Zootopia was a fantastic one. Sequel. Moana, that had a big impact. Sequel. Toy Story, that's been a fantastic moneymaker for us. Sequel. Frozen, oh yeah, that's that one that makes us loads of money and sells loads of toys of that cuddly snowman. Sequel. They need to stop relying on these safe bets and actually do new, interesting stuff that we want to see. They did something new and interesting with characters like Wreck-It Ralph. We've had 2 of them. Why don't we have a third one of them instead of getting a 5th Toy Story? It just seems weird to keep hammering and hammering into a franchise that's already had its satisfying conclusion. Now, another franchise that follows in its footsteps in that same way is Marvel, just hammering into things when they don't need to, but we'll come on to that. But that is all for their Disney animation news. The next bit of news was very interesting. Disney have invested $1.5 billion into Epic Games, and released that news with a very cryptic trailer that kind of hinted that something is coming to the world of Fortnite, heavily Disney inspired. It shows almost like its very own Disney Universe hub within Fortnite. We don't really have many details about this or what it's actually going to become, but obviously with an investment that large, it's quite easy to see why Disney are going to be getting their own game mode within Fortnite, and why so many of their characters have been popping up as skins over the past few years. And then we had the news that the Percy Jackson series has been renewed for a season 2. Season 1 was received incredibly well by fans, and that is why Disney have, of course, announced that they're bringing it back for a season 2. We know that the main 3 cast are most likely to return, but we don't know who else is returning just yet. Mandalorian and Grogu, the new Star Wars movie, has now been set within Disney's 2026 release date. We don't know exactly when, but there's 2 dates for Star Wars in 2026. For me personally, I think it's going to take that May slot, just considering that it is beginning production at the end of this year. The next thing to go over is that Pedro Pascal has now been announced as Reed Richards, something which a lot of people have feared and didn't want to come true, but here we are. Unfortunately for me, he was never my first choice, nor my second or third choice. I really wanted Penn Badgley to get this role, or they stick it out with John Krasinski. I don't think Pedro, you look at him and think, oh yeah, that screams Reed Richards. But I do think he has stuff that he can bring to the role, and hopefully it's better than I'm expecting it to be. I don't say that my hopes are high for this role and this casting. However, I'm sure it can surprise me. So I'm hoping that that is what I end up saying about this casting once the film is out, whenever it comes out. Because they announced the 2025 slate for Disney, and Blade and Thunderbolts were not mentioned. Fantastic Four, Captain America was. So we're assuming we're looking at a 2025 release date here. But they said that they were delaying filming, so who knows what's going to happen, actually, with the Fantastic Four. The final piece of news that Disney released is, I think, a piece of news that we needed to be announced about 2 years ago. And that is that the MCU is officially reducing its content output, its volume of content that it's putting out, and it's going to start focusing in on its stronger and more impactful franchises. This, therefore, means that shows like She-Hulk, characters like She-Hulk, and say Miss Marvel, that weren't received with a resounding success, will unfortunately be pulled back a bit from the universe, and characters like Shang-Chi, who had one of the most successful introductions in Marvel history, really, has just been left. But it's characters like this now that can take the front running spot now that Marvel and Disney are making this decision, which is fantastic. So, that is all of the Disney news, and I think a lot of it is promising and a lot of it is nerving, especially those Disney animation announcements. But I do think the Marvel news is prosperous, apart from Pedro Pascal. Now, what I want to move into is today's main topic, which is rewriting the Multiverse Saga how I would do it. Apologies for the little delay there, I was just pulling up my version of the timeline. So, how I think Marvel should have structured phases 4, 5, and 6. Now, for this episode of the podcast, I'm only going to be going over phases 4 and 5. I'm going to do 6 in a future podcast, or maybe a video over on our YouTube. And while I'm mentioning that, if you are looking for more content from the Watchverse, we have a YouTube account where we post videos about short form videos about little bits of news that are popping up here and there. We're over on TikTok where we do loads of short term content daily, talking about movie recommendations, movie reviews, castings, fan castings, opinions, ratings on movies that are coming out, shows that are coming out. We talk about everything over on TikTok. And then if you want all your up-to-date movie news and reviews, check out our Instagram, and that is where you'll find all of that. So, how do I think Marvel should have taken the beginnings of the multiversal saga and the middle of it with Phase 5? So we're going to begin with Phase 4. Kick this off exactly the same. WandaVision. You bring it out onto Disney Plus at the exact same time that it was already released. Pretty much keep it exactly the same as it was. I think it should push up to 10 episodes. You bring Doctor Strange in at the end and you tease Multiverse of Madness. And I think I would change the Ralph Boner joke to be actually Pietro from another universe brought in by Agatha. As it is the Multiverse Saga, you want to start having these multi-universe entanglements from the beginning. So I think you bring in Strange, you set up Multiverse of Madness quite nicely, you give it that extra episode so the finale isn't so rushed, isn't such a mess. And if you do that, I think this could actually end up being a very successful season of Marvel television. Now, next, what I have is a movie called Captain America, The Symbol of Truth. Now, this would be the story of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. However, the Flag Smashers would be kind of removed and replaced with the Flag Smasher, which is Karl Morgenthau from the comics. Be a much more gritty villain. and a lot more intimidating than the threat that the Flag Smashers posed within the show. Karen wouldn't appear in this. Not Karen, sorry. Sharon Carter wouldn't appear in this. And I think Zemo should only come into it for like the last 2 episodes of it and set up Thunderbolts. I'm unsure whether or not the Dora Milaje should be in this. I do think it raises a good point with Bucky, but at the same time, it is a big distraction, and they put them in a show that had 6 episodes, nearly 6 hours worth of content. In a movie, I don't think you need to strip it out. So I think what you do, remove the Flag Smashers, put Carl in, the Flag Smasher, you keep John Walker, you keep the story exactly the same, you put Zemo in about halfway through, not like nearly most of it, but Zemo in about halfway through, you build up that story of him hating the super soldiers, so that storyline, that thread is still there. And also you send him to the raft, just like in the show, and that sets up the Thunderbolts. Next in my Phase 4 is Loki. Keep this exactly the same. Loki Season 1, fantastic, brilliant, no problems with it. Next, I would have Shang-Chi. Now again, just like Loki, keep this exactly the same. A phenomenal movie, and I'm so upset that we haven't seen him again since. I just think it's such a shame that we have a character like Shang-Chi that had such a cultural impact when it released. The movie resonated with fans so well, and Marvel are just doing nothing with it. So Shang-Chi would come here for me, and in the future phases, you're going to be, in futures of my phases of the Multiverse Saga, you're going to hear about Shang-Chi a bit more. Next up, I would have Eternals. Now, unlike the movie, I would put this on Disney Plus. So this and Falcon and Winter Soldier would switch places. This would be a 12-episode series. You'd have 4 episodes here to fully introduce the Eternals. So you learn where they came from. You find out who they are, what their skill sets are. You find this out at the beginning, unlike throwing it in as flashbacks throughout the movie. So you have these 4 episodes, introduction, good, cool. And at the end of this introduction period, you set up a sort of tease that the Celestials may not be maybe more corrupt than they're appearing to the Eternals. Then you go into these final 8 episodes and you tell the story exactly the same, with the same level of visuals, that same visual aesthetic that the movie had, because that could make it a very fantastic piece of television and a very standout piece of television. I would keep the character deaths the same. However, with an episodic series, you can build connections to these characters, so when they die, there is meaning and meaningful emotion behind it. Whereas in the film, you watch people die, and it's just kind of like, okay, you don't really care, as horrible as it sounds. Like, I was more annoyed that Gilgamesh had died at that point in the film than thinking like, oh, we're not going to see Gilgamesh again, because we didn't have enough time to really appreciate him as a character before we saw his demise. And last thing I would definitely include in this show is bring Black Knight in as Black Knight, not just tease it in a post-credit scene and then nearly 3 years later we still haven't seen it again. So yeah, I'd definitely bring Black Knight into this somehow. I don't know how, but they can definitely do it. They found ample reason to put him in the film. They can find ample reason to put Black Knight in the show when they've got more runtime to expand with. Next up is Hawkeye. Now, this time around, it would be 9 episodes long. Daredevil would then be introduced in here instead of in She-Hulk, because She-Hulk will not exist in my Multiverse Saga. He'll be introduced in episode 7, concerned about what Wilson Fisk is doing, and he will meet up with Clint and Kate and will help them fight in the final battle. I think this would be fantastic, because it will begin to build these groups within the street-level MCU. It doesn't... I know people will probably complain and say, oh, it's Hawkeye's show, why are you bringing Daredevil in? But you have Punisher pop up in Season 2 of Daredevil, and Marvel is renowned for their little cameos. And I think when you go away from a film like Avengers Endgame and you see how many characters they've got now, you have to understand that there's going to be multiple characters within these projects. Not every character is going to be fully explored. Also, you're only bringing Daredevil in at episode 7, so he's only around for like the last hour and a half of the show anyway. Next up, I would put Multiverse of Madness. I would keep this pretty much the same. Most of the setup would be done towards the end of WandaVision, so you'd have more time to explore the multiverse. And I'd like to see a couple of cameos here. Nothing as crazy as what seems to be happening with Deadpool 3. But I think what you could put in here is a couple of the Fox universe people. Like you could have like maybe Chris Evans' Human Torch would have been a fun one, or Chris Evans as like the Hydra Captain America, or you bring in like Tobey Maguire again just to like keep that hype, or even like a Hugh Jackman Wolverine cameo in here would have been amazing to sort of sneak peek at Deadpool coming up. So that's what I would do for the main film. I would completely cut the clear post-credit scene, and it would more be a scene around setting up Secret Invasion. Now, it may not link directly to Doctor Strange, but Secret Invasion would be my Avengers movie to end Phase 4, and I'll come to that in a moment. Doctor Strange is obviously the guy who protects the universe, protects the multiverse from the threats, so it makes sense for his movie to end with teasing the next big Avengers threat, which will be the Skrull invasion by Gravik. So you'd put this in at the end of Multiverse of Madness, and this very nicely sets up Avengers Secret Invasion. Moving on from there, I would then go into Moon Knight Season 1. This time around, it would be 12 episodes. Jake Lockley would become a much more prominent character from episode 6 onwards. It would be an R-rated project and properly show the mercenary side of Moon Knight, which was severely lacking from the first show. This would more be a better balance between the mental conflict of the dissociative identity disorder and also the physical fighting that seemed to get lost within the show. It really needs to show that mercenary side of Mark because it was just lost. And I'm a massive fan of the Moon Knight comics. It's like one of the only comic characters that I really read as like a diehard fan. And watching Mark be sort of sidelined by this Stephen Grant character, and he's not really a mercenary, he's not really much of an aggressor. It's disappointing to watch. And I would just like to see a different version of this where there's a lot more physical fighting as well as that mental conflict, because they are both a part of Moon Knight, but they're equally apart. The mental conflict doesn't beat the physical fighting mercenary side, as the avatar of Khonshu needs to be a fighter. The post-credit scene here would feature Rama Tut somewhere in the multiverse to further enforce the amount of Kangs that are out there and that are coming. And it begins to build up these appearances of Kang throughout. You're dropping them in everywhere. And this is a great place to bring one in. Rama Tut links perfectly well into Moon Knight. So you bring him in here. It's just a little tease. Nothing too, like, I'm going to kill the Avengers type of stuff. But you watch, say, Rama Tut, and he's just, like, brutally killing someone. And just, like, a smirk at the camera. That would be fantastic. A very reminiscent one to the one of Thanos. But on a much more gritty scale, because this is a much more gritty show. So you could definitely work that in here. Then I think from there, you go straight in to No Way Home. You keep it the same, but I would put Vulture in here and make it a Sinister Six. And also, so there's a villain there that connects to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. That was one thing I thought was, like, lacking from this. Or, if that's not the right way to go, you bring back Mysterio, because it's quite easy, and I think a lot of us would understand that he didn't actually die at the end of Far From Home. I think that's very plausible. It could have just been another projection. I mean, the projections were great, so he could have definitely got away with that. I think also a Mysterio Strange fight would have been something really cool. But obviously that's kind of hard to do in the MCU because Mysterio is purely hologram. Next up, I'd go into Miss Marvel. Now, this would be 7 episodes, so nothing is rushed. She gets her suit in episode 5 and discovers she's a mutant at the end of episode 6. That kind of then empowers her for a fight in episode 7. This then allows her to be much more brave and bold, not meaning to go on a Batman thing there, much more brave in the finale, and hopefully a bit less childish, because she feels a bit of responsibility. The post-credit scene of that then would be Nick Fury saying he's becoming aware of this impounding threat coming of the Skrulls, and you see him return to Earth. Now, this would be achieved by the view of him returning to Earth. You see a spaceship come through the sky, through Ms. Marvel's window. So she's in her bedroom, she sees it shoot through the sky, and then it zooms in on the ship, and you have Nick Fury in there, and it's someone on the phone, and he's saying he's aware of this threat coming, and he's coming back to Earth. And then you zoom back in to Kamala smiling, cut to black, end of the show. And then to round out Phase 4, and I'm just going to get my list up here of my Avengers roster for this movie, would be Avengers Secret Invasion. Secret Invasion is a massive comic event, and it's so weird that they did it as a little minor TV show. So my roster here would be Captain America, Sam Wilson, Hulk, Captain Marvel, Bucky, Vision, Hawkeye, War Machine, Shang-Chi, Ant-Man, and the Wasp. Spider-Man would not appear because he is now street level. Thor would not be here because he is with the Guardians. And Strange, we're just going to say that he is busy. And I know that seems like such a cop-out, but I think he's too powerful for the Secret Invasion storyline. What this team does is it really rounds out Phase 4, but can also have enough in there to set up Phase 5. So you got Cap, who's coming in for Falcon and Winter Soldier. You got Bucky, Falcon and Winter Soldier. You got Vision appearing, Hawkeye appearing. Hawkeye is including Clint and Kate. They'd both be here. You got War Machine in here, who hasn't appeared yet, apart from his 2-minute cameo in the Falcon and Winter Soldier. You got Shang-Chi, you're bringing him back again, because you need to bring in these new characters that were positively received. But then also in here, you've got Captain Marvel and Ant-Man and the Wasp. And you can set up their storylines for Phase 5 in here. What would happen in this is President Ritson would die. This sets up Captain America 4 quite nicely. Gaia would have a smaller role. I just don't think these zoomed in shots of her and Gravik talking were really the key points of that show. And to balance all the Avengers, she just wouldn't be as key of a member in this story. Rhodey and Hill would be revealed as Skrulls, but it actually shows us for how long, because we got them both revealed, but we have no idea how long they've been Skrulls for. The end credits scene would set up the Marvels, and there would also be another Kang post-credit scene here, as he is the impending doom. He's the impending doom for the Avengers, so you need to have him in the post-credit scene. Then, much like Phase 3, there was always a movie after the big Avengers movie. You had Ant-Man after Age of Ultron, you had Far From Home after Endgame. Here it would be Thor, God of Thunder. This is just a pure adaptation of the God of Thunder comic book run. You make Gore actually kill on screen. Korg dies and does not come back. Jane isn't a goofball cracking jokes like "Eat my hammer." There's a massive tonal shift back to a serious Thor when he realizes this threat of Gore. I think it'd be fantastic if you have this comedic Thor and then he finds out about Gore and the comedy is gone. That would be amazing. This one would be a mission of Thor trying to prove that gods are the protectors of the universe and will be the protectors of the universe for many years to come. So that is my Phase 4. She-Hulk is cut, The Marvels is delayed, Wakanda Forever is delayed, and What If does not happen. So that, in all, is my Phase 4. Let's move on to Phase 5. Okay, so now I'm going to move into my Phase 5. This is a bit trickier to go through just because of right now we're still in Phase 5, so it's kind of hard to give my opinion on how I think they should have done it, being that over half of it hasn't been seen yet. However, I'm going to give it my best shot. I think this should have kicked off with Black Panther Wakanda Forever, a movie that I didn't really love, but I think would be a great one to kick off a phase, because it was a crowd pleaser on the most part. When you kicked off a phase with Quantumania, yikes. Yeah, this one just really Quantumania, I mean, really wasn't it, but yeah. Wakanda Forever would really work as the kickoff to a phase, and I think for me, I would actually make M'Baku Black Panther. I just don't think Shuri works as the Black Panther, and it removes her out of her storyline that could have been so great if it wasn't for the very unfortunate loss of Chadwick Boseman, who was a fantastic Black Panther in his time in the role. So I would have liked to have seen M'Baku in the role. I thought Namor was great. You can keep all of that. Talocan, keep all of it. That was all great. And then from there, you follow straight up from Wakanda Forever with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And not to keep this one exactly as it was, 10 out of 10 phenomenal movie. Keep this one exactly as it was. Remains the same. So that's 2 for 2 crowd pleasers at the beginning. Then you go straight in Loki Season 2. Another fantastic crowd pleaser. So that's now 3 certified bangers to kick off Phase 5. After you've already shouldn't have as much trust lost in Phase 4, but you've come into your next phase, Phase 5, with 3 fantastic projects. Keep Loki Season 2 exactly the same, and then you can have the post-credit scene here set up Quantumania. So then you have Quantumania next. What I would change here is slightly more of the old Ant-Man films. You would spend a bit more time still on Earth, I guess. You'd have the old gang back like Luis and Kurt, have some interactions with them, some fun Ant-Man quip moments, and then you take it into the quantum realm, and then you're fighting Kang, and then you're making Ant-Man a big sci-fi movie. But first you need to have those grounded Earth elements to begin with that made Ant-Man so good to begin with, and then you take the pivotal shift and throw him into the quantum realm to fight Kang. So that is how I would start the thing. So you've got 3 certified super strong things, an improved Quantumania, and then following this you have Daredevil Born Again, the revival to the most successful Marvel show of all time. What you have in this one is just like what they've just done with the creative overhaul. You bring back Karen, Foggy, Fisk, Bullseye. You just continue from where they left off. And they're giving them a new suit, which looks great in my opinion. I think the Bullseye suit needs some work. That looks whack. And the supposed White Tiger leak looks a bit wacky as well. But that being said, I think they're on the right track to get a banging TV show here. So whatever they produce, I'm confident can just slot into here quite nicely as the 5th project in my Phase 5. Now, coming into the Marvels. I wasn't a huge fan of the Marvels. I thought, yeah, it was fun. It wasn't anything spectacular. I think what they could have done with this movie is a lot more than what we got. I don't know who, but I'd definitely like to see a much stronger villain in a redone version of the Marvels. I don't think the comedy necessarily hurt it. I would remove the whole scene of the planet with like the talking through singing and then they're dancing and stuff. Just remove that completely. Way too goofy, way too wacky. I didn't like it. But yeah, I think a Marvel's reboot with a stronger villain could be fantastic. Keep the comedy, because that was the best part within it. I found myself laughing constantly in that movie. It was so fun, but there just wasn't enough in it to make you think like, oh, this is an incredible Marvel movie. So that would be like my first year and a half of Phase 5. The second part would be kicking off with Blade, the movie that has been rewritten, new cast, new crew. Yeah, rewritten about 8 times, and we still haven't got it, and it was announced over 5 years ago now, which sounds crazy to say. But Mahershala Ali is still in the role, and that casting is, I can't wait for them to see it on the screen, because some people don't like it. But that is going to be an incredible casting for the MCU. So I think what Blade needs to do is just really focus on being an R-rated, gritty movie that just tells a solid Blade story. I don't necessarily think it needs to do anything over and above, because the old MCU formula was never really going to over and above. It was just retelling those comic stories that people want to live out through the movies. And that's all Blade needs to do here to be a successful entry into the MCU. Then following off of the ending of Secret Invasion, we'd have here Captain America Brave New World. Obviously, this is again in a bit of controversy at the moment, with reshoots coming up, but you'd have Ritson dead in Secret Invasion, so you'd have Thunderbolt Ross here taking up the presidency of the United States of America and becoming the Red Hulk. So you have Cap versus Red Hulk. And in this, I would drop a few little cameos. I think it would be good to have Hulk appear here. If they were so set on introducing She-Hulk in this Multiverse Saga, just bring her in here. Makes much more sense. You could definitely pop Moon Knight in here as someone to work with Cap, and you could even bring back Kate and Clint and have this as like a mini Avengers movie, almost a bit like what Civil War was, but on a much smaller scale. I think the problem that we're seeing with the Multiverse Saga is no character is actually going to have a completed trilogy within this saga, which is stupid. I think it's right that Sam gets his trilogy completion over these 3 phases. At the end of the day, he is Captain America, so it is earned and it is deserved that he gets his completed trilogy across these 3 phases. So, after Brave New World, you go straight into Armor Wars. You carry on focusing on these Earth Avengers characters, because then you can easily have a post-credit scene at the end of Captain America that goes straight into this. Now, what I want this show to really do well is flesh out War Machine, a character we haven't seen done well before. That is why I've switched this back from a movie back to a show. I think they really need to explore Rhodey and let Don Cheadle have some fun with this role. I mean, he has had fun with the role in the past, but let him do it in the forefront lead of a project situation. I'm really excited to see what actually happens with Armor Wars. We don't know too much. I'm sure characters like Riri Williams are going to appear. Val's definitely going to appear. President Ross. And we may even get a little cameo back from Justin Hammer, which we saw rumoured a couple of weeks ago. But this one is kind of hard to call. There aren't too many rumours about this project, and we don't know what's coming up. This was one of the ones I meant when I said it's tricky to say how Marvel should have done Phase 5 without knowing exactly what's going to be in these projects. So this one's kind of a bit in limbo. The next final 3 projects in Phase 5 are all 3 mega projects, but they're all 3 that work at the end of this phase. Now, one thing that would come out after Armor Wars would be the Werewolf by Night special. So that would just come out after Armor Wars. Then next up, you would have Midnight Suns as a show. I think it needs to be a show because you need to have enough time for them to interact and then go fight something together. But my roster here would be Moon Knight, Elsa Bloodstone, Blade, Man-Thing. You would introduce Ghost Rider, you'd have Doctor Strange, Werewolf by Night, Agatha, and bring in Iron Fist. This would be my Midnight Suns team. It rounds out characters from Phase 4, Phase 5, and brings them together. Something that Marvel haven't been doing in recent times, which is bringing characters together and letting them interact together and do fights together and give the fans what they want, which is characters together. You get the point. So, Midnight Suns show, villain here would be Mephisto, who is rumoured to be the villain of Ironheart, but as that doesn't happen in this, she just appears in Wakanda Forever. Mephisto would be the villain here. Coming straight after Midnight Suns would be the Thunderbolts movie. Now, this one is really up in the air right now with recastings, and we don't know when the actual shooting is going to begin, but it's looking like it's still in the release schedule for next year, but Bob Iger didn't officially mention it when he was talking through the projects for next year. My team for the Thunderbolts is similar to what's been announced, but slightly different too. So we got Bucky, US Agent, Yelena, Red Guardian, Taskmaster, Ghost, Val, Zemo, Punisher, Red Hulk, Abomination, and Justin Hammer as a cameo. So Thunderbolts, I think, is a real easy one for Marvel to slam dunk. Of course, you would have Sentry in here as the villain, and you've got this new part that Io Edebiri's just stepped back from, which is rumoured to be Val's assistant. There's a lot of things to juggle, but I think they can do it well. It just needs to be a really good story about likable villains and likable anti-heroes. That's all this needs to be, is a very basic story, but with fantastic interactions and a solid backstory of Sentry, who is our main villain here. And if they can do those 3 things well, which, as I mentioned, is character interactions, a simplistic plot, and a great villain backstory, Thunderbolts is an easy slam dunk for Marvel to get right. And then to end off my Phase 5 will, of course, be Deadpool 3. This one at the end of Phase 5 is perfect. with all its multiversal elements, it's the right time to show the capabilities of the multiverse before you go into phase 6 where the multiverse blows wide open. So you're going to have all these cameos from the Fox universe and previous Marvel movies pouring into Deadpool with Ryan Reynolds fun, Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine, all these fantastic reprisals of roles with a great story directed by Sean Levy. This one, again, just like if they do Thunderbolts right, is a slam dunk for Marvel. What they need to be focusing more on is exactly what Bob Iger has said. A focus on the stronger franchises and the stronger characters, and go down in how much they're releasing so that everything is stronger. And I think if they do their phase 4 and phase 5 like this, then that's exactly what they'll begin to see. I'm not going to do my phase 6 today because I think I want to leave that for another video and I want to work into it a bit more before I present it here on the podcast. However, thank you all so much for listening today. Make sure to check out the Watchverse on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, anywhere else. If you're listening from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, please do drop a follow or a subscribe, as it does massively help me out as I try and grow this podcast and get more episodes out for you guys. But thank you all for listening in today. It's been a pleasure making this episode, and I hope you had fun listening to it. And I'll see you guys next week when we discuss Madam Web and One Love, the Bob Marley movie.